Hi and welcome along to the Investor Scale podcast. Today we are joined by Alex and Natalia from Mercia Ventures. Welcome along, guys. Nice to see you. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your role at Mercia Ventures and what Mercia Ventures do?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for having us. So I'm an investor at Mercia, and Natalia is a portfolio director, so leads on helping a lot of our companies and sitting on boards. And then just very quickly about Mercia, so we invest from seed to Series B, writing checks of 1 million to 10 million, and we invest across the UK, and we invest across a broad range of sectors from health, deep tech, consumer and software.
So you're up from London, you're up from Newcastle. So what makes Scotland an investable proposition? Why are you up here today at Investor Scale?
Sure. So from my perspective, Scotland is a fantastic hub of startups and exciting scale-ups, in part because of the expertise in the area. You've got fantastic universities, fantastic kind of groups of business folk that bring with it sort of expertise in life sciences, in software, fintech, ag tech, clean tech, lots of different ranges. I think there's also a cultural element in Scotland, which is fantastic, of quite collaborative, quite business savvy. And I think that also ties into the ecosystem here in terms of some of the established angel groups, some of the early funds, make it a great place to come and try and find companies that we can support. And indeed, we have a number of companies based up in Scotland ourselves. So
does that whole ecosystem make it an attractive proposition? So I guess there's lots of companies, good companies all over the world, but why is it that ecosystem that almost attracts you to Scotland and says, you know, there's real opportunities here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I look after 10 companies in my portfolio, and 3 of them are in Scotland.
Right.
And 2 are raising Series B, and that's what I'm noticing, that there's quite actually a lot of companies now in Scotland that are getting to that scale and really pushing ahead, really raising that next round of funding.
So what do you think that we can do then as an ecosystem? So obviously getting to that next stage, you know, we do a lot, there's a lot of startups in Scotland and they do really well. So what do we do, or how can we support those companies to get to that next stage and attract that level of funding?
You know, it's really interesting to me that I think you already do quite a lot. So I've been invited by Scottish Enterprise to some amazing events, investment events, or company meeting investors, or company pitching events. And I get even more invitations from Scotland and the ecosystem that I do in the region that I'm based in, which is amazing, right? And what I like is the variety. So here the events are direct connection of investors at the right level to the companies at the right level. You get a lot of information beforehand about who's coming, because I think today we are at this conference and there are about 120 attendees and 60% of them are companies. We've seen the list, we've arranged the meetings, we've companies came to us via LinkedIn or other means to also get in touch with us, and I think that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Brilliant. And is there other areas around obviously you guys are a global company, are there other areas and other regions that are doing a really good job at this?
So from my personal experience, like, as Natalia said, I think Scotland is doing a very good job, and we love that there's that kind of particular identity to Scotland and Scottish companies that shouldn't try and change necessarily. But in terms of other regions that we work in, because we work across the whole of the UK, I've noticed particularly somewhere like Northern Ireland do a fantastic job of, again, kind of hosting events, shouting about the businesses that are based over there, and bringing in investors from across the UK, also from overseas, such as the US, to come and meet those companies, come and hear the stories. Because a big part of it, as you'll understand, is telling that narrative about why that particular company is very exciting, why that founder is super driven and ambitious. And I think personally, you should never let go of that ambition and never try and lose that sense of shout about what you're doing and why it's going to be the next big thing.
Yeah, and let me just add to that. So for me, what makes Scottish companies really stand out is that they're born global. So if I give you example, I teach an accelerator in the Netherlands, and I'm always surprised how startups in the Netherlands, because it's one of many countries in Europe, they already, from their first 10 clients and customers, they think that they're going to be international and not necessarily European. They go far and wide. And I've noticed that Scottish companies have a very similar mindset.
Okay.
So the first 10 customers are not necessarily other Scottish companies.
Right.
They're already set up and thinking about global reach, and that's amazing.
So you touched on this, and I'm going slightly off our questions here, but
Oh no.
yeah, don't worry. Ambition was a word that you used there, and actually it's really interesting, and I think there's a general narrative sometimes that we perhaps, and not that we're not ambitious, but maybe we don't shout enough about how good we are. Do you find that in other areas, and do you find that perhaps we could be a wee bit more, proactive about how we talk about our companies? Do you think that's something that, as a region or as some of the companies you engage with, that's an issue?
So we as a fund, we've tried to position ourselves as champions of ambition, in particular the ambition of the founders that we work with, because we see our role as being kind of supportive, hopefully providing some advice along the way, but really just trying to elevate what they're trying to achieve. I think, speaking candidly, I think the UK as a whole kind of has a bit of a challenge with that. Compared to some of our cousins across the pond over in the US. They've got a slightly different approach to things, and again, I don't think we'll probably ever get to that extent of ambition, but we're working hard to try and collaborate with our founders to help them think about how they can overachieve on their goals and go a little bit further, both in just the business plan, but also in the way they interact with the wider market. So it's definitely not just a Scotland thing. I think it's across the whole UK. We could all do a job, and particularly as funders, do our job to try and help elevate and support that ambition. Do you think that mindset is I suppose what I'm trying to say is that we create really solid companies. I think there's an ongoing feeling here that, okay, we're maybe not shouting from the rooftops saying, we've got amazing companies, but they're really solid, and I think that fail fast mentality is really important, because it's important in starting and scaling businesses, but it also has to come with a bit of solidity. I think being honest, I think the honesty part of it comes through in Scottish companies. Would that be right?
Absolutely. But also when I think about ambition and scale-ups, I think about 3 dimensions. So when companies become bigger, you tend to see their customer base expanding, so they have more customers, more revenues. Then internally, they tend to become bigger themselves. So going from 20 employees to 100 in a year, that's a lot, right? That's an ambition, right? And the third one is that mindset, you said, mindset. But then how do you teach ambition, or how do you showcase ambition? What works? And what I know works is having companies, founders, investors that done it before, share the stories, or literally being in that ecosystem close together. So even if you look at business incubators or business centers, if you have a place where you have companies that raised Series B, in the same place, if you have a concentration of founders that are global and exited, and you have opportunities to come together, share the stories, whatnots, the sort of the good, the bads, actually that ripples into the ecosystem. So that's what works. Modeling and examples really work.
So that is, because again, probably come back to this, but so something like Investor Scale, where we're bringing together these sort of opportunities, is a really valuable part of the ecosystem, I guess.
Absolutely. I think the story we heard this morning, we were just chatting, he's stealing all our
from the CEO of Modular.
Modular.
What were some of the points that you loved? So it was
something like, you need to build relationship over 2 years, you need to plan. We were thinking,
when fundraising, Natalie was literally talking about it this morning around how some of the best advice we can sometimes give when companies going out for fundraising is to treat it as quite a long-term initiative. Like, you should be building these connections with potential funders, being very structured in the way you do it, almost creating a CRM around it, because it's quite often the relationships you've had for years that you then end up, because you want to be working with these funders and these founders, from our point of view, for years, probably 5 to 7 years or more. And so you've got to have that kind of understanding of each other, hopefully a relationship already existing. That's not to say you can't receive funding from someone you've recently met, but I think that the telling the story over time of the growth of the company and their ambition, that's probably from multiple times speaking to someone, checking in as things progress, and then when the time is right, get to work together.
So that was going to be my next question, was what do we do and how do these companies go about doing that? So like you say, longer term vision of that and actually building those relationships. So things like, again, investor scale, but then perhaps going down to London or Europe or wherever it might be to try and start building those relationships in the knowledge that I'm not walking in here today and walking out with a check. It is a long-term approach. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you were making the point that you would hope the founders coming to events like this would be proactively trying to reach out to the likes of us to have conversations, even if just short, to build that relationship. That was what you were trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think I wanted to ask people today in the audience how many actually reached out, because panel members' names and all the investor list was also quite public. It's been there for months. Yeah. We had some approaches, but not as many as I would have liked, to be honest. Yeah. But I think there's another story here. If you are raising a Series B, for example, right? I think that's sort of the big story and the big challenge now. It's kind of thinking not who's investing, right, but who do I want on my cap table?
Okay,
right?
Interesting.
Who is it I want to work with?
And
how do you know if you want to work with us or others if you've never met us before,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Is the relationship part of it, is that what Mercia brings as well? Is kind of, obviously, investment, money, but you sit on a number of boards here and you're working with a number of companies. Is it that additional, you've got similar sort of aligned values, but also you can bring additional insight in terms of, what the wider market might, wider market opportunities. Would that be right?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the main challenges when you start on your Series B journey, for example, is crafting the narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not to say that you're changing your results or what you do. It's that bigger picture, because often when you're coming to that stage, you're already quite successful and you've probably been focused on solving a particular problem. It's kind of lifting your head up, and it always surprises me how long it takes to then take in what's happening in the market, even though you've been doing this anyways as you go along.
Yeah.
But then speaking to as many investors or advisors as possible, and certainly always crafting that story takes longer than you think.
I like the idea of that almost a CRM full of investors and building those relationships and so on. So what is it that what more opportunities do we need to present as a nation? What do we need to do as an ecosystem to attract investors from down south and from London and from Manchester and so on and so forth? What would help up here? I suppose we've got the good ecosystem, we've got the universities, we've got the accelerators and so on. Is there anything else here that helps us present those companies well? Is it a case of saying we need to be down in London, or we need to be in Manchester? Do we need to take some of these companies and be down south?
In my opinion, I think there's a combination of things. So I think those sort of road shows are very useful because it kind of gives you exposure to some of those ecosystems in different regions. But I think events like this are absolutely crucial because you shout about what you're trying to do. I think particularly refreshing to see one focused on scale-ups like Investor Scale is, but then providing the wonderful sort of setting, but also the facilities to be able to arrange these kind of meetings between founders and between investors, because just having an excuse to have a face-to-face is absolutely brilliant. I think as well, in the way that you guys are with this event, initially sort of telling the stories of some of these startups, being able to showcase them is exactly more of what we need. So I think those roadshows are useful, but I think having them in location is, get the investors to come to you guys. Like, we're happy to
you
jump
heard
on the
it here.
train.
Get the investors to come to us. Let's get them up. Absolutely. So just one last question around, growth sectors and growth opportunities. You'll get to see real opportunities and new businesses that are flourishing. So what sectors are really interesting for Mercia at the moment?
Sure. So I think we're obviously quite a broad investor, but I think particularly thinking of some of Scotland's strengths, we're super excited about some of the innovations coming out from life sciences and biotech. Mm-hmm. You guys are a powerhouse for that. Mm-hmm. With the research, with the universities, not least with new advances in computational power and new discoveries. Things are becoming really exciting. We've got a few companies up here focused on that. You're also definitely got a great pedigree in fintech with other software solutions like cyber side of things. Again, we've got a few companies there. And then other parts of, I'd say also clean tech or climate tech as well. Those, I think for me, those areas are really your heritage. Not to say there aren't other great companies, but I think those are absolutely prime. And it would be remiss of me not to mention obviously AI.
Yes.
And
AI, of course. Yes, but I forgot about that.
But the importance there is that it'll impact so many different sectors that it should generate innovation in so many different areas, not just your typical, we're an AI company. Yeah. It'll unlock so many new efficiencies and so many new opportunities. Yeah. So I think for me, those areas are really interesting.
Brilliant. Listen, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I look forward to catching up with you later at the event.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent.